What's going on, everybody? It's me, Ben. I'm here live. This is Have At It, episode 93. It's NFL Draft Talk. How is everybody doing today? As you can see, I got on the TV screen there the NFL Draft. Actually, let me move that a little bit so that way I don't get in trouble with YouTube or Facebook. Um, so, how's everybody doing today? How's everybody's NFL draft going? I know a lot of people are excited. This is the time of year where you feel like whether you're a team that doesn't have too many needs, or you're a team that's looking for that next franchise player. um it's a very unique time. So as far as my Buccaneers go, this is a year where, again, we're picking middle of the draft because how we ended our season. Obviously, we made the playoffs, won the division for the fourth year in a row. So normally when you have a record like we did and how we finished, you're probably going to end up being in the middle of the draft. But I feel like this year for the Bucks, and we'll talk about other teams in a minute. As far as the Buccaneers go, I felt we addressed a lot of needs. Now, the big shocker came Thursday night when the Bucks drafted Emike Ibuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State, number 19. I think a lot of Bucks fans, including myself, thought, this is defense. You go after like a Jahad Campbell from Alabama, Donovan. I'm not going to butcher the last name, from the edge rusher from Boston College, or Maxwell Hairston, corner from Kentucky. You thought, you know, guys like that you would see the Bucks draft, but they went with the wide receiver, Abuka. Um, yeah, it did catch me by surprise, but at the same time, I actually like it. And the reason why I like it is, there are a lot of teams in the NFL that are going to run, four wide receiver, plays. Um, Also, you have to take a look at the long run, you know, look ahead into the future here. Mike Evans is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Now, that doesn't mean he's not coming back. It's just he's going to be a free agent. It's something you got to think about. Also, Chris Godwin's health issues the last couple years, last 3 years, 2 out of the last 3 years, he's had season-ending injuries. Um, so I know we just resigned him, but you got to, try to figure out, his dependability, where that's going to be at, and who knows if he's going to be ready for the start of the NFL season 2025. Which they say, currently from reports I'm hearing is that he's, on pace to start the season. His rehab's going good, so and that is good. Um, there's a lot of it that goes into this, and the GM Jason Lights earned a lot of people's trust, including mine. So I'm not freaking out over that. I didn't freak out Thursday night. You got to play it out. You got to let it play out, and that's what we've done. In the second round, we ended up drafting cornerback Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, um, which I actually like that as much as I hate Notre Dame. This isn't about Notre Dame, where the young man played, which school he played at. That doesn't matter to me. Like, if you're a good enough player, you should be drafted. And there were a lot of Miami Hurricanes that have been on the Buccaneers. Warren Sapp, you know, so it doesn't matter what school they went to. Now you're a Buccaneer. Great. And I like the pick. There is concerns about, people saying, well, he had the season ending injury this past year. But he had 9 interceptions in, I believe, like 34 games for Notre Dame. So the guy's a ball hawk, and that's been talked about with Todd Bowles, is he wants ball hawks. And Morrison fits that description. He's a ball hawk. You know, he reads, you know, quarterbacks very well. Um, he's got speed. That's another thing. Todd Bowles likes speed on his defense. So, Morrison has all those intangibles that the Bucks need, defensively. So it's a good pick. I'm impressed with it. Now, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bucks fan. I'm not fanboying. Oh, so we just got breaking news here on let's have at it. Shador Sanders is going to Cleveland. So he got picked. That's been the other big talk, Shador going to the, because he's fallen into the draft. But the Browns got him. So Shador Sanders, 5th round, pick 144. The Browns select Shador Sanders, quarterback for the Browns. So before I get into that real quick, I'll just finish up with the Buccaneers picks. So far, we got 4 picks. And we should be coming up in the next 10 picks for a 5th round pick. But the 3rd round pick, we picked up another cornerback, Jacob Parrish from Kansas State. Again, another good cornerback, similar to Morrison, you're starting to kind of see a theme here with the Bucks. They're 2 corners, and it's pretty obvious that that's a weak spot in the defense. Jamel Dean, when he's healthy, he's pretty good, but that's the problem. He's not always healthy, and that becomes a reliability issue. And it seems like the Bucks are aware of that and taking 2 corners in his draft, good solid corners. I think it's the right move, in my opinion. So I like where they're going with that. And then in the 4th round, the Bucks drafted offensive linebacker David Walker from Central Arkansas. Another speedster, quick off the line. So these are good picks. The Bucks are focusing on defense there. I know you thought they would do that in the first few rounds. They took a receiver instead in the 1st round, but so far they're addressing the issues in these rounds, right? In these other rounds. So yeah. So again, we just got breaking news that Shador Sanders finally got drafted by the Cleveland Browns. My thoughts on that personally, the reason for is him falling down. I don't believe it's race. I'll just put that out there right now. I don't think race has anything to do with it. I think it's just one of those things where, it could be his attitude, it could be his dad. And I think that's the combination right there, is what I'm saying. That's what I think it is. It's partially has something to do with his father, but also I think it's the young man's attitude. Now, I don't know. Nobody was in the interview rooms with him. They said that a lot of GMs said that he didn't interview very well. He had an attitude. He was arrogant, whatever. But again, I wasn't in the rooms. Nobody was. We'll probably never know. But it just seems like that's the only reason I could think of, is that his attitude, and maybe the fact that he's Deion's son, probably has a lot to do with him falling like he did. But look, it wasn't a very good quarterback class to begin with, and I do think Shador was the 2nd best quarterback in the draft. Cam Ward, I think, is a little better, a little more NFL ready. But I do think that it is ridiculous that, Tyler Shaw or Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, who the Giants moved back up into the 1st round to draft. I don't think they're as good as Shador quarterback-wise. Tyler Shaw has accuracy issues. Same with Jackson Dart. Milroe has a great arm, but Again, all these guys, it's a lot of it's accuracy. You know, if there's one thing about Shador, maybe from a football standpoint, he does hold the ball too long, tries to wait for plays to develop, but he does make plays, but he does make some good plays. And to me, I just feel like the slide was mainly due to the fact that, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, was due to his attitude. You um, and the interviews that took place during, before the draft. I mean, you would think, well, one or two teams, okay, you kind of scoff it off. But when it's pretty much almost every team that he interviewed with saying that he showed a bad attitude, he showed it wasn't a good interview during the process, then it does kind of make you wonder. Um, so again, that's the only thing I could think of. I don't think it has anything to do with race at all. I know a lot of people will make that claim, but I just personally don't see it. I mean, come on, Cam Ward was the number one pick. Jalen Milroe got picked before Shador, so I don't think race has anything to do with it. Dylan Gabriel got picked before Shador, and Dylan Gabriel's he got picked by the Browns. So, and really, I don't think that's a good situation for Shador to the team to go to is the Cleveland Browns. That's another thing I wonder. Like, you just picked Dylan Gabriel. Now you're picking Shador. So I don't know, but that's the Browns for you. That's just the Cleveland Browns. Okay, we got some comments here from Facebook. Scott Thaler, thanks for tuning in. Says Bucks will pick Shador. Scott Thaler, Johnny Dean, Marty McKnight, Jim Melvin, Corey King Brown. And Scott says Shador Sanders got picked by the Browns. Yep. Fifth round, pick 144. So that's a head scratcher. Why did you pick Dylan Gabriel and then Shador Sanders? From an NFL standpoint, I don't get that. Why didn't you just pick Shador in the fourth round? Like, this is the Browns for you. This is the Cleveland Browns for you. The more things change, the more they stay the same with that team. And I don't know. Unless they're gonna have a competition, I'd pick Shador over Gabriel for sure. I mean, I'd pick Shador over Kenny Pickett. You got Joe Flacco there. I don't know. That's the Browns for you. So there were other big moments in the draft. Obviously, the Jaguars traded up to get Travis Hunter, which it's interesting. I mean, I think Travis Hunter is the best overall player in the draft, but that's a big time move if you're Jacksonville. You gave up a lot of picks, your first rounder for next year. Can he play on both sides of the ball? They're going to try. But my issue with Jacksonville is, they got to get the quarterback right. And Trevor Lawrence, you wonder if he's ever going to get it. That's why they brought Liam Cohen in, former Bucks OC. It's more of a Trevor Lawrence reclamation project. I personally don't see it, but good luck to Travis Hunter though. We'll see how it plays out. And then Giants got Abdul Carter, number 3, which I think we all pretty much expected after Hunter was gone. I like the move for the Giants. Get a defensive end, go alongside with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. Hearing that they might not pick up Kayvon's fourth-year option. So get the best defensive player in the draft, and that's what they did with Abdul Carter. Patriots got Will Campbell, um, offensive tackle. That's a good one. You got to protect Drake May, so I like that. Browns got the 5th pick from that Jacksonville trade. They got Mason Graham. Good player as well. So those are the top 5 picks in there. Some notable ones. We'll go over it. Let me check it here in my draft tracker. And by the way, the Browns did trade up to get Shedeur. Very interesting there. They actually traded up to get him. Okay. All right. Well, just going over this list here, we got Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders. I projected that would happen. That did. I think that's good. Geno Smith needs a running back. That's going to help that offense out tremendously. Armand Membu going to the Jets from Missouri. Shout out to Scott Taylor there. It's, offensive tackle, and that's good. That's a good pick. It's nothing flashy. Offensive line, I know that, they're not flashy picks, but offensive linemen are the lifeblood of your offense. It always starts up front in the trenches. So it gives Justin Fields a offensive lineman, protect him. So I like the pick. Tetraroa McMillan going to Carolina, the wide receiver from Arizona. I think that's a solid pick. I can see why they did that. Get a weapon for Bryce Young, but also he's got that Mike Evans type length and body. Dave Canales is the head coach there. He worked with Mike Evans for a year in Tampa when he's the OC. So they're trying to mold that player in him, get that kind of player, I should say. Saints got Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle from New Orleans. Again, I'm fine with that. It's a good pick for them. Tight end Colson Loveland going to the Bears. That's a good one. They add more weapons. I know they got Komet, but a lot of times teams like to run the 2 tight end sets. Ben Johnson did that in Detroit when he's the offensive coordinator. So it makes a lot of sense. Ben Johnson's trying to mold this team offensively, kind of like what the Lions did. So yeah, that's a good pickup. Still got some, I won't go through all of it, but the notable ones. Green Bay got a wide receiver, Matthew Golden from Texas. First time in, I believe, like 18 years they drafted a wide receiver in the first round. They didn't do that for Aaron Rodgers, but they did it for Jordan Love. So, and it seems like a good pick. It makes sense. I mean, think about it. You wonder about Christian Watson's health. He always seems to get injured every year. Romeo Doubs is your number 1 guy. He's your 1 receiver. So Golden could be that number 2 guy. I think it'll work out good for him. And, the Eagles, they got Jahad Campbell, linebacker, which I think that's a good move. He fell all the way to the bottom of the first round and had him projected going a little higher, but hey, you know what? The Eagles, man, they seem to always get the good players. They always seem to fall to them. So yeah, so that pretty much rounds out first round. Now I will say the Chargers, let me get back to them. Shout out to Sean Spencer, who's a North Carolina football fan. They got Amarion Hampton from North Carolina, running back. I actually like this pick because we all know Jim Harbaugh, when he was with the 49ers, when he was with Michigan, he always loved having dual running backs and a great offensive line. Well, the Chargers just signed Najee Harris in the offseason free agency. Now you can pair him up with Amarion Hampton. So he's going to have 2 running backs along with that good offensive line. That's a good pick. So kudos to the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh is molding that team in his vision, and it's going to be fun. Those AFC West games this year, with Chargers and Raiders. You got Ashton Genty, Marion Hampton, those two running backs. Man, talk about if you're in fantasy leagues, talk about a lot of fantasy points right there if you pick those guys up. So yeah, I like that pick for the Chargers. And looking at the Falcons, they um, I believe they got 2 picks. Yeah, they got went defense, Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. James Pierce, the edge out of Tennessee. Interesting picks there, but again, makes sense. They went for needs. Also, you got the Bills getting Maxwell Harrison, which that was one of the corners I liked. But I like Benjamin Morrison, so I'm not going to complain at all about that. But Maxwell, that's a good place to go. Buffalo is going to go to a playoff team. You're going to go up against receivers in the AFC East and the AFC in general. So why not get a guy that can, line up against the best receivers there? Guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. So yeah, you got Tyreek Hill if he's still there. You got Garrett Wilson. So you're gonna need a guy that can go up against some of the top receivers in the league. So good pickup there. So yeah, it was round 2. Some noticeable ones. The Bears went and got another wide receiver, Luther Burden the third. That's a good pickup. Now you can pair him up with DJ Moore on one side. I think it's a sneaky good pick by the Bears. Again, this is the Ben Johnson effect. He wants to mold that offense around his vision. Did that with Detroit, with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that's a good pickup. Good sneaky pickup there by the Bears. Nick Emery, South Carolina, going to Seattle. They actually moved up to get him. That was who they like. Again, defense for Seattle. That's Mike McDonald's specialty. Kind of get that Cam Chancellor type of safety. That's what Emery brings. He's a hitter, so that's a good pickup. Like I said, the Bucks drafted Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. I like the move. The Raiders, they got Jack Beck, wide receiver. So the Raiders, first 2 picks, offensive players. So you want to build out for Geno. Also, I like what Washington did. They got Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, cornerback. Obviously, Forbes hasn't played very well, so you get a guy like Amos come in. Again, he's going to go up against the best receivers in the league. That's a sneaky good pick too. So, looking at some of these other third round noticeable. Let's see, Mike Green going to Baltimore. There are issues about his off the field stuff, but for the Ravens, I mean, that's a good second round pick. Get him. You need an edge rusher. You got your corner already in Malachi Starks. So Ravens are loading up on defense. Like it. That's pretty much it for the second round as far as what I say. Oh yeah, the Browns getting Carson Schwarzenegger. That's another guy I would have liked the Bucks to have gotten, a linebacker from UCLA. Had 90 solo tackles in 2024 for the Bruins. Eventually, I would think could possibly be a Levante replacement. Levante is on those 1-year deals. You don't know when he's gonna retire. He's back this year, but one of these days he is going to leave. He's going to retire. So, but that's okay. No big deal. round 3. You know, not a lot of big names. Again, this isn't the best, you know, NFL draft as far as top-notch players, but there's still some quality players that can come in, contribute, develop. Um, like the Raiders, they have like 10 picks in this draft, and they went offensive tackle in the third round with Caleb Rogers, Charles Grant. So obviously they want to shore up that line again. This is to protect Geno, but also, you can develop these guys and hopefully you can have a solid career. Your most notable name in the third round was Jalen Milroe going to Seattle. Again, I know they signed Sam Darnold, but it's a good place to go actually. Milroe, that's a nice spot because you can sit for a year or two, learn under Sam Darnold, you know, watch the game speed of the NFL, get some experience there, and who knows? Sam got that new 3-year deal. Um, we know at times Sam Darnold played really well, but then there are times he doesn't play well. So, this is a good landing spot for a guy like Milroe. Go there, just sit, learn, work on your accuracy because he's got a great arm. He has definitely a great arm. He can move in and out of the pocket. So this is a nice spot for him, I think. And obviously, Dylan Gabriel got picked by the Browns. I don't know why they did that. And then you pick Shedeur. Why didn't you just pick Shedeur first before Dylan, or just pick Shedeur? But I don't know. Cleveland's Cleveland, so yeah. Well, let's see. Again, I'm just going by round, just some notables. I mean, as far as the names go, the big name Cam Skattebo got drafted by the New York Giants. A lot of talk about him around the third, fourth round from Arizona State. I think that's a good pick for the fourth round. Running back, you got Tyrone Tracy there already, who had a solid year last year for the Giants. I mean, especially after you just let Saquon walk, you know. So get a running back, get Skattebo and Tracy in that backfield. That's going to help Russell Wilson a little bit. So yeah, that's a nice move. Trevor Etienne, who's the younger brother of Travis Etienne, who's with Jacksonville, got picked by Carolina. These are just notable names. I'm going down the line. Jack Sawyer, edge rusher from Ohio State, going to the Steelers. It's a good pick there. And that's another one I don't understand why the Steelers didn't go get Shedeur. Why not? You need a quarterback. But I guess according to reports, Art Rooney wants Aaron Rodgers, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. You have to wait for him. He don't wait for you. So, I think they should have got a quarterback, but that's the Steelers for you. And then Mike Tomlin's never developed a quarterback. I know it's not his job. He's a defensive guy, but the quarterback has not been developed under Mike Tomlin. He inherited Ben Roethlisberger from Bill Cowher. You drafted Kenny Pickett. That didn't work out. So who knows with the Steelers, but Buccaneers are going to be picking the next few picks, so I got a feeling they may go offense on this next pick. Just my opinion. But yeah, the big breaking news just a little while ago. The 5th round, pick 144, the Cleveland Browns selected Shedeur Sanders. He's finally off the board. I'm sure that makes Mel Kiper relieved, very happy. Although He'll still complain. He'll still bitch, and because he's Mel Kiper, he thinks he knows everything. But in a way, I do kind of like seeing Mel Kiper just lose his shit because he just does. It's just funny. Yeah. So let me see here. Sorry, guys. I'm a little on hold here. Let me away. Okay, Johnny Dean. Thanks for tuning in, bud. Says Ben Cornett, good draft. 6 more picks, so the Bucks pick again. Yeah. Johnny Dean 5. Shador. Thanks for tuning in, Shador. Shador will be starting by week 5. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, again, I don't understand why did you wait to pick him here? Why didn't you just draft him in the 4th round? Why'd you draft Dylan Gabriel? I mean, nothing against Dylan, but he's nowhere near as good as Shador. Again, this is why I just wonder if this was done to be, to humble this kid or what. But, to maybe it's his arrogance, the way it came off in interviews. I don't know. But from a football standpoint, why would you, why you got 2 quarterbacks now? Now you got 4. You got Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, and Shador Sanders now. So I don't know. But it's Cleveland. I don't know why we should be so shocked by that. Shador said not sure Sanders would fit in the Pittsburgh locker room. Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of it. But what are we doing? Are we going to wait for Aaron Rodgers, who may or may not want to join your team? Now, and then you're really stuck in shit because you're going to rely on a guy like Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is not going to lead your team to playoff wins. I'm sorry, he just won't. He's not that kind of quarterback. He's a backup. Then you got Skylar Thompson, your other quarterback on the roster right now. None of these guys are going to be, they're not going to lead your team to playoffs. Okay? So if I'm the Steelers, I mean, I get it from a locker room standpoint. I understand it, but you kind of put yourself in that position where you're waiting for somebody that may or may not want to come to your team. And then what happens if Aaron doesn't show up? If he doesn't sign with you guys? I mean, I understand Mason was with the Steelers before, but still, it's not good. It's not good, football strategy. I would have took a chance at Shador. I'm not saying draft him in the 1st round. I'm saying you had your chances in the 2nd round. You had your chances in the 3rd round. You couldn't pull the trigger then. I don't know, just my opinion. Johnny Dean says Mel Kiper and the rest of them push their own agendas. Oh yeah, I mean, but I do love the fact that we get to hear Mel bitch and complain and just lose his crap. So for me, it's for entertainment purposes. I do like to see Mel pissed off and whiny. It's fun to watch because he is a whiny little bitch. I said it. Mel Kiper is a whiny little bitch. That's all he is. So he pretty much gets it wrong most of the time anyways. So that's what makes it even more fun to watch. And Misador says easier to move on if he falls. Yeah, true. It's a good point. But I just, again, it comes down to just probably his attitude and Dion, his dad, that kept him going down in the draft. But I just feel like from a football standpoint, if you're Cleveland, and Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. Just saying. So I don't know. I don't know, man. But that's the beauty of the draft sometimes. You just never know. You get to get your surprises. And that's one of the things about this year in the NFL draft was you didn't really have a lot of great players coming out of this particular draft. So you'd probably see some surprises here and there, like the Jags trading up for Travis Hunter, which he's a generational talent. Don't get me wrong, but is that really going to change things in Jacksonville? I doubt it, because you're quarterback. And if he has another bad year, the quarterback class is going to be better. Drew Allard, Arch Manning next year. So maybe Jacksonville's looking at that scenario. This is now or never for Trevor Lawrence, I think. So, well, I'm not going to stay on too much longer, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Johnny Dean, Misador, Scott Deller, thanks for the comments. Appreciate it. Again, breaking news once again. Shedeur Sanders finally gets drafted. Pick number 144, the 5th round. He is going to the Browns. And it's the Cleveland Browns. So, we'll see what happens there. But Misador said earlier that Shedeur will be starting by week 5. And again, that could be a very real possibility. It could very well be. Flacco was on life support, as an NFL quarterback in this league. He's like a cat. He's got 9 lives. So Kenny Pickett, no, he's not your answer. Neither is Dylan Gabriel. Okay. So, could this be, like Misador said, easier to, let go? Who knows? But with that being said, I'm going to take off here. I just thought I'd give you a quick episode of Have At It, episode 93, NFL Draft Talk. Like I said, as far as the Bucs go, I thought they had a pretty good draft, in my opinion. I do like the wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka again, and you got to realize something. Jason Light wants a good locker room, meaning good high character players. That's what he wants. Not just great players, but high character players. Egbuka and Morrison fit those descriptions very well. And Egbuka's a leader. He's a locker room leader. That was what he was at Ohio State. He could have went last year. Would have been drafted in the 3rd or 4th round, but he stayed another year. Helped out with Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, who, he's going to be a stud. So within the next year or two, Jeremiah Smith's going to be drafted pretty high in the draft because he's got that elite talent. So I love the pick. And again, you got to think about the future as well. With Mike Evans possibly maybe retiring even. I don't see that. I think he's going to be back because the guy can still play another couple years. And you got to keep in mind, too, the injuries. And not just with Godwin, but with Evans, too. He's got the hamstring issues. He's had a history of those. So you also can have another weapon now. I know we got Jalen McMillan, but he developed nice. But with the Buka, he can do a lot of things. Great route runner, runs his routes clean. He's actually a pretty decent blocker, wide receiver blocker, like Mike Evans. So not only do you get the benefit of a great receiver, great hands, runs great routes, but he can also block at times too, which is very important. Yeah, so I'm thrilled with it. I'm thrilled with the Benjamin Morrison pick as well. I'm not looking at the injury from the end of the year. People get injured. It happens. But the upside's great. Morrison, a ball hawk, 9 interceptions, and I believe like 34 games he played at Notre Dame. So dude can play. Same with Jacob Parrish, David Walker. We'll see. And then the Bucs, breaking news, the Bucs got edge rusher Elijah Roberts from Southern Meredith. So 7.5 sacks, 2 years in a row. So nice. So they've addressed the defense. Now the Bucs were up some Bucks fans are upset. Whoa, why did we draft a wide receiver? We already got him. Relax. There's more rounds, and the other rounds they've addressed it. So I like the picks. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be fun. And we got the schedule release coming out Wednesday. Excited about that. So, my next episode of Have At It, we'll talk about the schedule release. Who the Bucks are going to play, when they're going to play them, how many primetime games we're going to get. I'm sure we're going to get a couple. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, with that being said, everybody, thanks for joining me today on this episode of Have At It, episode 93, NFL Draft Talk. And as always, like, subscribe, and share. Greatly appreciate that. My YouTube channel, Ben Cornett 9015, and on Facebook in the Ben Zone. So, with that being said, everybody, have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk next time here on Have At It. See you later, everybody.